if we're presented with a choice, we can ask ourselves, would our great-great-grandparents have eaten this? That's a great clarifying question. And if not, then maybe we should think it over a little bit more. Maybe we shouldn't make that choice. Hello, friends. It's the Carnivore Rabbi, and we're here, as always, to meet, pray, and love. And today, we have so many choices. Our lives are filled with choices. You go into a grocery store, and there are at least 100,000 different items. And then let's say you just go to the section with peanut butter and jelly, which you wouldn't go to as a carnivore, but let's say you did. And you look at the different types of jelly. There would probably be at least 20 different varieties of jelly, if not 50. And does that make sense? Jelly's a pretty simple thing. And yet, for one can of strawberry jelly, you've got 20 different options. Now, you might think that having so many choices is wonderful. It would make us happy. Aren't we built around having more choices in life, that's a positive, especially in America? We're built on this idea that freedom of choice, we're individuals, we have different opinions, different preferences, and we should be able to choose from all of them. But the problem is that too many choices make us miserable and unhappy. They create stress. The social scientist, Dr. Barry Schwartz, wrote a whole book on this called The Paradox of Choice, that there is an ideal number of choices. Let's go back to jelly. If we had 3 or 4 different options for strawberry jelly, maybe one that's a little stronger, maybe one that is fresh, different choices, that would be ideal. But when we have 20 different choices, that creates stress. And the trend in our culture is more and more choices. And that simply leads to more and more stress and confusion. And one of the great benefits of the carnivore diet is it cuts through that stress. Because the problem is, all the choices, they not only create stress, but they create openings for marketers, very smart marketers, to take advantage of us. People will look at one tiny difference, magnify its importance, and then charge double the price for the item for that marginal difference. But carnivore cuts through all that confusion and manipulation. It gives us a clear path for making a choice about what we are going to eat. If you go into a supermarket and you are a carnivore, you can basically ignore the entire supermarket except for the meat section and maybe the dairy section if you eat cheese and eggs. What a clarifying feeling that is. That brings much order to chaos. And that in itself saves an enormous amount of energy and time. That's a gift. Second thing carnivore does for us that helps in this quest is it gives us a philosophy. That is such an important part of life. I try to tell my kids about that. I obviously tell people in my congregation about it. Having a philosophy helps you get through life. It helps you clarify choices, not only in diet, but in relationships, in faith, in money. Having a philosophy gives you clarity in a world of noise and confusion. And the problem is, we are not really taught to develop a philosophy. Sometimes we're just given a default philosophy by choice. We get it from our parents or our friends or our peers or our boss. We just kind of imbibe it. But actually thinking through what is our philosophy, what do we believe, and how will this guide our choices is a very, very healthy exercise. And when it comes to carnivore, it is rooted in a philosophy. At least for me it is. I guess some people just, they believe somebody and they follow it and it works for them, and that's okay. But having a philosophy makes it even deeper and lasting. And for me, part of the philosophy is that carnivore is rooted in the natural world. It brings us closer to nature. We have moved far, far away from nature. Nature does not allow people access to, ultra-processed foods 24/7. That's not nature. Nature is eating at appropriate times, eating simple ingredients and simple foods, and carnivore fits that. Now, why do we want to be closer to nature? Well, if you're a person of faith, You might think, you might believe we are designed that way. That's how we're built. If you believe in evolution and you see us as being evolved after millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years, this is how our ancestors lived for the vast majority of that time. Maybe, you know, looking on a human scale, 99% of that time we were living as part of the natural world. So we are built that way. That's what fits our bodies. That's how our ancestors survived. We are their descendants. We are their heirs. And so our bodies are adapted to the way they lived as well. Not that we don't change, but those changes take place over thousands of years. And the changes in our diet practices have only really happened over the last 50 years, maybe 100 years. So that's the philosophy. We are part of the natural world, and we are eating in a way consistent with that. And that helps clarify our choices. If we're presented with a choice, we can ask ourselves, would our great-great-grandparents have eaten this? That's a great clarifying question. And if not, then maybe we should think it over a little bit more. Maybe we shouldn't make that choice. Third thing, and this is related to philosophy, is I believe that the carnivore diet gives us a way to cut through the noise. We are surrounded by so much noise. Noise on television, noise on the media, noise online. And those noises are always giving us conflicting messages. Eat this, not that. Oh, it's healthy. Less saturated fat is good for you. More saturated fat is good for you. More protein, less protein. We are just surrounded by noise. Now, again, this is not just in diet. This is in finance. This is in parenting ideas. This is in faith. This is in politics. This is in everything. There's so much noise. And when you have a clear idea, a simple path, a philosophy, you can turn off that noise. You can listen for the music. The music is what you make, what you hear. If you can, think about it. There are so many different sounds. I'm outside right now, and I'm surrounded by many beautiful sounds. But there are only certain ones I hear and certain ones I listen to. I can cut through the noise. Part of that is just natural, how our body works. But when it comes to everything we see around us, when it comes to our minds, we have to find a way to cut through the noise. David Allen, the productivity guru, talks about if we didn't have a way to clarify, to simplify, we would go into a library and we would feel totally overwhelmed because there's hundreds of thousands of books about a variety of topics. But usually you go in and you have an idea of what you're interested in. You want to look at books on philosophy or books on politics, whatever, and you find what you're looking for. And we need the same thing, especially when it comes to diet. What is our melody? What is our song? What is our path? And that's another gift carnivore gives us. And again, it doesn't have to be carnivore. It happens to be what I prefer, what many people find to give them the greatest health, the greatest focus, the greatest uplift. But having a philosophy is in some ways independent of what that philosophy is. As long as it's moral and promotes goodness and connection, that's important. But having a philosophy, a way to cut through the noise, can make your life so much richer. And it doesn't even cost anything. It's something you develop up here. It's something you develop in here, in your heart. So I hope today, on this beautiful day here in Chicago, that you can work on developing a philosophy, a simplicity, to cut through all the noise, to live with meaning and purpose, and that the carnivore way of eating is a part of that.